مع مؤسسة جرينش وسفارة سويسرا في القاهرة وسفارة نيوزيلندا في مصر إطلاق مشروع ضخم لإعادة التدوير والفصل من المنبع في 150 مدرسة في كل محافظات مصر بالتعاون مع وزارة التربية والتعليم وجو كلين. مبادرة The Art of Hope من خلال أعمال فنية قدمها طلاب كلية الفنون الجميلة للتوعية بأهداف التنمية المستدامة. تمويل 2000 مشروع مستدام من خلال قروض حسنة دوارة للشباب، وخصصنا جزء منها للمشروعات البيئية بالتعاون مع مؤسسة الأورمان. ولأننا في بنك القاهرة بتتوافق أعمالنا مع استراتيجيات البنك المركزي المصري والمعايير الدولية، أصدرنا تقارير الاستدامة العالمية. الحفاظ على البيئة مشوار بدأناه وهنكمله الخلق فرص بلا حدود. بنك القاهرة، فرص بلا حدود. لأن كوكب الأرض هو وطننا كلنا، من الضروري إننا نهتم بيه وبالموارد اللي بتشكل أسباب الحياة لينا، خصوصاً إن استهلاكنا زاد بشكل كبير على مدار 100 سنة اللي فاتوا، ودلوقتي الأرض هي اللي بتدفع الثمن اللي في الحقيقة هيكون غالي قوي علينا لو ما بدأناش قبل فوات الأوان. من هنا كان هدفنا في بنك القاهرة إننا نشتغل على مشاريع وبرامج بتخدم الإنسان في مختلف المجالات. ومن الهدف ده استراتيجيتنا بترتكز على محاور كتيرة، مش بس على النمو المالي، ومن أهم المحاور دي الكفاءة المالية، الحوكمة والمخاطر، الاستدامة. إحنا في بنك القاهرة بنسعى دايماً إننا نقدم فرص بلا حدود لكل فرد في مختلف المجالات، زي الصحة، التعليم، الرياضة، الثقافة، بالإضافة إلى دعم وتمكين مختلف الشرائح، خاصة الشباب والمرأة المعيلة وذوي الهمم، ومبادرات تنمية القرى بما يتوافق مع رؤية مصر 2030. وعلشان كده قدرنا نوفر 1,300,000 فرصة عمل ومشروع إنتاجي مستدام للشباب من خلال تمويل المشروعات متناهية الصغر. واستحوذ صعيد مصر على أكثر من 50% من عدد العملاء، ووصلت نسبة المرأة المعيلة إلى 35% من التمويلات و40% للشباب. ولأن المحور البيئي بيستحوذ على اهتمام كبير ضمن استراتيجيات العمل ببنك القاهرة، أطلقنا مبادرة بي جرين خلال عام 2020 تماشيا مع المبادرة الرئاسية اتحضر للأخضر تحت إشراف وزارة البيئة، استجابة للتحديات البيئية اللي بيواجهها العالم. الترويج لخطورة استخدام المواد البلاستيكية أحادية الاستخدام من خلال مبادرة فؤاد وكفر عبده بلا بلاستيك بالتعاون مع القنصلية الفرنسية بالإسكندرية ووزارة البيئة وبان لاستيك. مشروع شرم الشيخ بلا بلاستيك بالتعاون مع برنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي ووزارة البيئة ومحافظة جنوب سيناء والاتحاد الأوروبي وسفارة سويسرا في القاهرة. التوعية بظاهرة تغير المناخ بالتعاون مع السفارة البريطانية في مصر. دعم المنتجات الصديقة للبيئة من خلال المعارض المختلفة زي معرض تراثنا بالتعاون مع جهاز تنمية المشروعات. حملات تنظيف الشواطئ واللي بينظمها البنك سنوياً بشكل مكثف بالتعاون مع بان لاستيك. حملات تنظيف مياه النيل اللي نظمها البنك بالتعاون مع بان لاستيك وفيري ناين. إطلاق مشروع جرينش كلاب الذي يستهدف 1000 طالب عبر المؤسسات التعليمية لتطوير 40 مشروع سنوياً، مما سيؤدي إلى حل 40 مشكلة مجتمعية بيئية مختلفة بالتعاون مع مؤسسة جرينش وسفارة سويسرا في القاهرة وسفارة نيوزيلندا في مصر. إطلاق مشروع ضخم لإعادة التدوير والفصل من المنبع في 150 مدرسة في كل محافظات مصر بالتعاون مع وزارة التربية والتعليم وجو كلين. مبادرة The Art of Hope من خلال أعمال فنية قدمها طلاب كلية الفنون الجميلة للتوعية بأهداف التنمية المستدامة. تمويل 2000 مشروع مستدام من خلال قروض حسنة دوارة للشباب، وخصصنا جزء منها للمشروعات البيئية بالتعاون مع مؤسسة الأورمان. ولأننا في بنك القاهرة بتتوافق أعمالنا مع استراتيجيات البنك المركزي المصري والمعايير الدولية، أصدرنا تقارير الاستدامة العالمية. الحفاظ على البيئة مشوار بدأناه وهنكمله الخلق فرص بلا حدود. بنك القاهرة، فرص بلا حدود.
Please be seated. Sharif, appreciate if we close the doors, please. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. Youth and Day and Science Day, Youth, Science and Future, in fact, Day. We are very happy having you all today. Thank you so much for being with us. In fact, and very shortly, to gain some time, we are very happy and honored after the International Society vested its trust in Egypt to host COP27. And with the days that has passed, Egypt has shown very comfortable and successful, thanks to God, in hosting such a very huge, big event where more than 190 countries are contributing, each with a small piece in the puzzle to draw a very big picture about a common challenge. For the first time in the history of mankind, we are all working towards one common challenge that we would like to address in an inclusive manner. With the Youth and Science Day today, we are honored to welcome our esteemed panel here. And in fact, the beauty of this panel is that lies on two fronts. The first front is that the panel is very comprehensive in terms of its structure. We have the government, we have the regulator, we have the financial institutions, and we have the youth. So everybody is here to talk to everybody. So we have the vision, we have the policy, we have the implementation, and we also have the counterparties who are the beneficiaries, where we are all gathered today to meet and serve here. The second beautiful picture of the day lies definitely with the presence of the audience. I can see the full financial sector geared beyond both of you. God with you, but God serves you in what's happening. In fact, the case that we are going to address today is very blunt. And I'd like to give you three pieces in the puzzles that we want to address today. The first piece in the puzzle is that youth compromises 40% of the global population. And when it comes to Africa, youth compromises 70% of African population. So the stakeholder is very important to address and work with. If we add to this notion, another notion that the world population, according to the United Nations Statistical Office, is expected to reach from 8 billion to 12 billion by 2100, this means that 4 more billions will be added to the global population. 3 out of the 4 billion is in Africa. So this complicates the challenge further. My second point, according to the Youth Solution Report, youth feel very frustrated about their future. They are very worried about climate change because, in fact, climate change deprives them from assets it deprives them from their income, and it threatens their careers, and it may also threaten their occupancy status. And hence, we are facing a very big problem. Youth must be part of the solution, definitely, as we are addressing them. In this context, it's my pleasure to welcome today our esteemed panelist, His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Sobhi, Minister of Youth and Sports of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Mr. Sharif Luqman, Sub-Governor of the Central Bank of Egypt for Financial Inclusion, Mr. Tariq Fayed, Bank Chairman and CEO, Mrs. Nicole, Director of Climate Change BII, nice to meet you, Mr. Saif, Operation Director at Telda, Mrs. Clémence, Agency Française AFD Country Director, thank you for, and Mr. Ahmed Sobhi Sabahi, CEO of Telda. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we'd like to start with His Excellency. In fact, while we are congratulating ourselves once, we are congratulating you twice. First on COP27 and second on COI 17. In this respect, and from heart to heart, I'd like you to reflect for us on your vision about the nexus between youth and climate change, how you see the nexus, and in the same time, we would like you to reflect us, if possible, on the major outcomes that came from the COI and that will be discussed through our negotiations in COP27. Thank you.
Actually, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here in that such great honors and great panel and sessions to speak with the people that they know what they are doing very well and they have the future because the finance and financially issues is very important for any kind of activity for the human being, for the business work, for any kind of activations. Myself, as a Minister of Youth and Sports, I appreciate the very highly appreciations as well the cooperations between the Minister of Youth and Sports with the sector of financial sector in Egypt, the central bank and the rest of the banks. Actually, they support the whole movement in Egypt as well the other sectors for the future in the sports. I don't know exactly how could I start, but if I go for the level and the bottom line for the cooperation, starting from the corporate social responsibility that we have, we subsidize by the sectors for the every single details to speak with them for our plan. So we don't worry about the youth movement because of we have the Egyptians financials and the sector that they give. If I go and speak between both the climate change and youth, the awareness, the educations, the implementations, the presents and the futures in the youth. Because of that, they have to know very well what is the affections and affected by the environment to them, and the future. They shouldn't be worried about the anything. In the strategy ways, we always speaking about the future. So we could say planning for the futures and manage the present. The present for the youth is how to deal, how to work with the climate change. Because of that, we have the with United Nations as a Minister of Youth and Sports cooperated with the Minister of Environment and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to organize the COI. The COI is the Climate Change Summit for the Youth. Successfully in the one of our premises in the City of the Youth and Sports in Sharm el-Sheikh, we have 3 days. But before the 3 days, we have 6 months to prepare the thing and everything with the YONGO. The YONGO is the organizations for the climate change for the youth. And we did it with the quiet issues, but we have with the COP27 presidency the abstracts and a brief, and we have for today, for the Youth Day, to speak about the recommendations from the youth to the whole world for the climate change. Actually, everyone is speaking about the education, awareness, and education's awareness. It's easy to speak about this one because of its curriculum and non-curriculum plan. We have such the 5,000 youth community centers. We have more than 11 sport and youth city and 1,200 club. So we could go without not with the non-curriculum recommendations for the climate change. Educations will cooperate with the minister and Minister of Education about the official curriculums for the awareness and educate the kids and the young for the futures and the climate change. But the finance is very critical and important because of nothing could go forward without the finance issues. Because of that, when I have the invitation from my friend Mr. Tarak Faid, and he is one of our cooperatives and even sponsors, and the cooperation with the a lot of projects, as well as Mr. Mohammed Al-Itrabi and the Central Bank, and the Bank Al-Ahli, Mr. Hisham Aukasha, and the rest actually, that they subsidize the activity and innovations for the youth, as well the initiatives. So I'm replying very fast. So I have the Youth Day and many of the sessions, but I insist to join for Your Excellency to sit in and speak. And I saw Mr. Hussein that he subsidized with the CIB, the squash. I'm looking forward for him for 3 days. I didn't find him, so I find him here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. According to the Youth Solution Report, youth are facing 5 challenges, 5 major challenges. You addressed directly one major out of them, which is education, networking, which is very important for youth. And you addressed another 2 indirectly through cooperation with the financial system, yet we will talk later on technology and the role of technology in these contexts. Now we have a glimpse on the global and national strategy with the COI and the vision of the ministry. Allow me to move to the policymaker, the regulator, who takes this vision and consolidate it somehow in this respect. My next question is to Mr. Sharif Luqman. Financial regulators have an important role to play in empowering youth to fight climate change. Financial inclusion strategies and programs are important and has been central focus for the Central Bank of Egypt. From your perspective, in recent years, what kind of initiatives, incentives, programs, and the like has been in place in order to support either the global vision or the national vision?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Egyptian Federation and the Industrial Federation for hosting us. And I want to thank also Bank du Caire for the invitation. And it's a great honor to be with such a great panel. When we are talking about youth, we should be more energetic, like the minister, because when we are talking about numbers, Egypt, more than 65% from the Egyptian population is below 35 years. Sometimes we are always hearing about we are exceeding the 100 million and it's a threat on the country. Meanwhile, we have to look at it as an opportunity. Youth in the Egyptian country, it's a great opportunity for our growth. And when we are here in the COP talking about sustainability and climate change, this is the future. When we are talking about 65% from our population are youth, This is our future. This is the people or the population or the segment which will implement our plans for the climate change and for the transformation into green. Accordingly, education is very important. Preparation is very important. Education and preparation is not only capacity building. It's some action should be taken from now to involve these people. As you said, they have frustration for the youth. It's fact. But we worked on it from the beginning. What is the reason of frustration? And how to involve these people into the ecosystem to be effective in the future, to be able to implement our plans for climate change and for sustainability. Sustainable future for Egypt is come from this segment. Accordingly, we start to look inside the market. We found that this segment is not appealing for banks. Banks, they are not, this is in the past, huh? We are talking about 3 years back. This segment is not appealing, not profitable. They don't have, banks is always looking for profitability, win-win situations. They don't have saving enough to go for banks. We start to build the capacity on the banking level and how this segment will be profitable and how we can make it appealing for them. This is the future of any sustainable bank. Yes, maybe you don't have the benefit on the short term, but sure, you will have the benefit for on the long term. And we started with bank on this level, on this regard, and we will talk about number later, how this affected on terms of number. Secondly, we didn't find any products for this segment. And maybe this is apart from the frustration. We can deal with this segment 35 below with 16, 17, 18 years, the teens, with the same product of the matured segment. First of all, the central bank issue regulation to open accounts starting from 16 years old without any documentation except the ID. And the bank started to have this product. We didn't stop here. We talked with bank and we start to explain the importance of having a direct proposition for the segment. This segment not need only an account. They need a proposition, how they can benefit from their account and from dealing with the banking sector. And thanks God, this also implemented inside the market. Financial literacy or youth literacy, yes, it was for part from the capacity building for the banks, but it was very important for the youth themselves. We went with the cooperation of all the governmental body. We are on a very close cooperation alignment with Ministry of Youth, with Ministry of Social Solidarity, with the Parliament, and we have here Mr. Mahmoud Hussein. We are always talking and discussing and putting our plan how to reach this segment and to build the capacity and educate this segment how to deal with the banks, not for the benefit of banks, but for the benefit of youth, because we are preparing them for the future, for the access to finance. We are not looking for now the 16 years will open a saving account or a current account to deal with cars. We are looking for the future, okay? And this is also implemented. We put a clear definition for the youth in the banking sector, which is from 16 to 35. And this is already implemented. It ended in 2019. Our financial inclusion rate for youth, it was almost 35%. Now we are standing at 45% from 2020 to June 2022. I think it's one of the achievements in this segment. One of the action taken by the central bank, it was very effective action, the youth event. And youth event, it's implemented in 2019. We allowed bank to go to the market, to go to the youth concentration areas. Part from it was the youth centers of the Ministry of Youth, clubs, universities, school. opening accounts there. This was a barrier or an obstacle for banks to start, sell, and promote their products outside of the banking premises. And we discovered that one of the barrier or the obstacles is there is a barrier between youth and the banking premises. So we have to solve it. We solve it with the youth event. You can imagine in 2 years, from 2020 till 2022, we sell, the banks sold, not we as a central bank, the banks sold due to such regulation 2 million product for youth in 2 years. We will go for access to finance, but I will give the floor for my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much لحضرتك يا فندم. In fact, there's something very strange that popped to my mind. I'm sitting on a purely financial stand. Still, education and capacity building has been mentioned twice. And in fact, according to the Global Youth Solutions Report, capacity building and networking was mentioned as the main object challenges and barriers that we are facing. But in fact, برضو حضرتك mentioned something that took me by surprise a little bit, which is at one point in time, we thought that youth are not appealing for the banking sector. And as this is at one point in time, I think this changed a lot right now. And this will take me back to the question to Mr. Tariq. Why the youth day? Why the youth day? BDC choose the youth day as a thematic day. Why the youth day? And what is the role of the financial intermediaries in empowering youth to face climate change? لا خالص. I think he will be.
Good morning. I would like to welcome you all for attending Bank Care panel on climate and youth. I would like to also welcome my fellow panelists and thank His Excellency, the Minister of Youth, for accepting to being a part of this panel despite of his several commitments. Basically, when we're talking about youth and climate, and the main essence behind having such events is basically to accelerate the commitment towards climate action, which basically affects future generation. So if we, before I answer maybe the question, maybe if we look at the commitments towards climate change, it has been on the, I would say, delayed somehow. COP26 outcomes were overshadowed by the global crisis, COVID, Russian-Ukraine crisis, and many other topics. So I believe that there are many topics that has to be addressed, and we have to accelerate climate actions in terms of maybe maintaining the global temperature levels at the 1.5 degrees Celsius as per Paris Agreement, the commitments towards climate action, the loss and damage topics, and many others that has to be tackled. So basically, we believe that if no serious actions will be taken in the near future, youth, as Dr. Ihab mentioned, represents more than 40% of the global population. And I believe that it is very clear that they will be the most vulnerable for climate shocks. And here maybe allow me to quote a statement by the UN Secretary General, quote, "My generation has largely failed until now to preserve both justice in the world and to preserve the planet. It is your generation that must make us be accountable to make sure that we don't betray the future of humankind." So basically, the youth is not only the climate of climate change, but they could be valuable contributors for climate actions. They could act as agents for change and innovation. And I think we have stressed today on the innovation and change and technology. So this is a very important aspect in order to use, enable them to use science and technology to accelerate climate actions. As far as the banking sector is concerned, I believe that this is a very important topic that we have to be engaged in, because basically the main role of the financial institutions and bank is financial intermediation. So actually we have to bridge the gap between supply and demand. This is very important. And if we're gonna talk about the supply side, I think we have been engaged as bank for many years back in deploying and raising funds through MDFIs, through donor funds and others, in order to avail sustainable financing to our clients. And on the demand side, I think it's also important that we, as banks and financial institutions, we have a role in increasing the level of awareness to our clients to use sustainable finance and economic friendly, I would say, products. This is very important. And here, the role of the financial institutions and banks are not only limited towards funding, but it definitely goes beyond that. Banks has to play a role in terms of support and enablement of our society, our clients, with focus definitely on youth, in order to enable them to use, again, innovation, technology that could reduce climate risks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will stand here a little bit because I would like to reflect on this. I think what is very different in your statement is that you are taking into implementation. So you are facing ground the problems. I would like to reflect for me on the difference between dealing with youth and with ordinary client. I think they are no more clients, but rather partners. You are building a partner, right? Appreciate if you can reflect quickly on this, please.
Maybe I think I will answer here the second question, maybe.
Thank you so much. What I wanted to reflect on is that, in fact, the idea of having a facility and the client will change with time. Now we need to have a partner that is served by a product rather than a client that is served by facility. And why is this the case from my perspective? From my perspective, this is the case because youth are acquainted to convenience. They were used to click a button and receive an answer. Now, standing in the roll and having a ticket, waiting your window to take your loan will not work for them. Convenience, from my perspective in this respect, could be the name of the game. We are also having something that is very beautiful today. We were just discussing before the panel. We are honored by the BII. We are honored by the AFD. So we have Paris, and we have Glasgow, and we are currently in Sharm el-Sheikh. And then we'd like to transfer this into some sort of a roadmap between the three of us. I would like here to welcome now, thank you so much. I would like to welcome Nicola. Nicola is the Director of Climate Change by the BII. As an expert who worked with different multilateral development organizations and advised governments also, and advised private sector. Please brief us on how do you see youth and climate finance different in developing countries, and what opportunities and barriers are there to scale up climate finance? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and also thank you for the invitation on the panel, which I think is great to have so many different actors talking about this really important topic. So I think when we think about youth and developing countries, I think two things really come to mind in relation to climate justice, which obviously we hear a lot about at this COP. So the first one is obviously that from a geographical perspective, obviously climate change will hit those the hardest that didn't cause it in terms of, developing countries, many African economies and so on. But then secondly, you can take this also to an intergenerational angle, right? Because the youth didn't cause the climate change, was not involved in the inaction for the last couple of decades, but they will have to really deal with most of the consequences. So I think from that perspective, obviously, the continent has, a lot of youth will have to bear the brunt of the climate change aspects. So the question is then, how do we deal with this? And in terms of the effects on youth, there are just two things that I also wanted to highlight. because one are the direct effects of climate change on youth, right? In terms of flooding, heat waves, all of that, already impacting many countries, but getting worse over time, unfortunately, because a lot of climate change is obviously already locked in. But then the second aspect is also, I guess, the indirect effect that could potentially impact youth as well. So if climate change, gets even worse, if more climate action needs to be taken, that means a lot of funding has to go to mitigation and adaptation and resilience. And then the question is, does this mean there's less funding available for other really important sectors, such as health, such as education, for youth? So I think there's this sort of indirect channel as well. But then I think, as we've heard before, I think youth can also be really an agent, for change and really take proactive action. And again, I think the African continent, you can see that youth are really concerned about climate change. I think there was a survey by the World Economic Forum in 2021 that said 70% of African youth are concerned about climate change, and 85% think their governments are not doing enough. And I think, therefore, they can be really the driver of change in terms of being activists, innovators, entrepreneurs, and so on. And therefore, I think it's absolutely key, that we see a lot of youth at this COP27, but also for us as financial institutions, including BII, to really think about how we can support youth entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, much more specifically to come forward with the climate solutions that we all need.
Thank you so much, Nicola, on these ideas. In fact, according to Bath University in the UK, in a survey that was conducted on 10,000 youth across 10 countries, the major statement that came out of the research, we are extremely worried and we don't think that we are doing enough to save our future. Another notion on this report was, and it's a very important notion, that we will lose our income, we will lose our assets, and we will lose and we will shift our jobs. Definitely, this is completely a magnitude shift. On another notion, and since we are in COP27 with the three tracks, the first track is mitigation, the second track is adaptation, and thanks to the Egyptian government today, we have also the loss and damage track on table. I'd like to say a very important notion, less than 5% of the global climate finance is directed to adaptation, and this needs to change. And less than 10% of this figure was directed to Africa, and that's why this needs also to be changed. Thank you so much for the intervention. And I think with you on the panel, move now to Ms. Lemon. And I'd like to quote the major statements on the AFD website. Don't want to quote. Okay. According to the AFD, Egypt has substantial natural and human resources. However, strong population growth exacerbates pressure on the environment to an increase in the needs for services and creation. To address these challenges, AFD is supporting the structural reforms launched by the Egyptian government. Accordingly, see AFD role in fighting climate change, what are the existing channels or products in supporting youth in climate change?
Thank you so much. And again, let me echo the co-panelists' gratitude for having us, Your Excellency, the Banque du Caire colleagues. Thank you so much. So I'll start by the first point, AFD's role in climate change. And on this panel dedicated to youth engagement and empowerment, say that we take pride in being the oldest development bank. So just to reintroduce ourselves, Agence Française de Développement is France's development finance institution. Over the past 15 years, we've had a very, very strong climate mandate, and in many ways, we see a special responsibility to deliver on the Paris Agreement. So since the Paris Agreement, just to give you a few facts and figures about our role, AFD has mobilized 30 billion euros of climate finance, and thankfully a stronger performance than what you've just quoted in terms of the sector. A third of that in Africa, and a third of that share of climate finance, and a rapidly growing share of that climate finance, which we're very proud of, towards adaptation. In Egypt, we've invested 3.1 billion euros over the past 15 years, and 90% of these projects have positive impacts on climate. So again, to say that climate action and climate finance is really part of our DNA. So in terms of our role in fighting climate change, obviously we're here as a financier. We don't implement projects, but I just want to go through 5 levers that we feel are very important. One is that we make sure that all of the projects that we finance are aligned with the Paris commitments, with countries' own NDCs. So in a way, that's a little bit of our do no harm approach, ensure that alignment. 2, we support, Your Excellencies, we support government climate responsive projects and policies. And for example, our Minister of State announced 2 days ago 100 million euros for Egypt's platform on the nexus of food, water, and energy, Egypt's NOAFI initiative. That's a concrete example of climate finance being aligned with government priorities. 3, we encourage the alignment of Egypt's financial system as a whole. We're convinced, and that's something that AFD really pushes in international forums and advocacy platforms, we are convinced that national financial systems are required to massively scale up climate finance. And that's why it's such an honor to be part of a panel where, as was said earlier, the entire financial chain is represented. Again, as a concrete illustration of that conviction, here in Egypt, we announced this morning a new partnership with Banque du Caire, but also with Banque Misr and NBE, and I salute the colleagues that are here in the audience. 140 million euros of concessional financing to support SDG projects that are implemented by entrepreneurs here in Egypt. 4, we share tools, methodologies. We contribute through network and advocacy structures like the IDFC, International Development Finance Club, and the Finance in Common initiative that brings in all public development banks. So in a way, we're hopefully playing our role in terms of a new architecture of cooperation among development banks to align to climate finance goals. So that's a role of as a norm setter. And 5, we report and we hold ourselves accountable. And AFD published during COP this week a report by 3EG, so external observer, that unpacked our climate finance portfolio and verified our commitments and evaluated us against peers. So I encourage you to go check out the report. So those are the 5 levers that we see in terms of our role in fighting climate change. Maybe to move to your second question on the existing channels and products. I loved your point about seeing youth as partners, but also thinking specific products that are tailored for this segment. We have a strong AFD as a development finance institution. We have a strong and growing focus on youth. It's anchored very high. It's a priority of President Macron, who actually met this week youth climate activists in Sharm el-Sheikh, including Egyptian climate activists. We have, for a lot of reasons, our focus on SDGs, on health and education, sustainable livelihoods. We have a lot of tracks that support youth, but I want to end here on 2 specific examples of financial products that are geared towards empowering youth. One is obviously our work on entrepreneurship, and again, that work is done and can only be done through Egyptian banks, through public sector banks. So our support goes through actors like Banque du Caire to scale up funding and handhold climate entrepreneurs. We also have a window through Poparco, our private sector subsidiary that provides guarantees, venture capital, so support fundraising for startup and SMEs. So if you're in the audience and interested about these opportunities, I'm glad to follow up on that. Last example of dedicated windows, our president announced last year in October 21, 130 million euros specifically to accompany African startups, including very, very early on in their funding journey, African startups managed by youth. And around that financial commitment, there was also the conviction that we needed to create a community of entrepreneurs with peer-to-peer networking and mentoring and a link to international investors. So those are two examples of concrete channels in the way that AFD is supporting youth action through climate entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much for this. And we will now turn to the clients. I think we have received now the words of the government of Egypt, the words of the regulator, the word of the financial institutions, and multilateral development organizations and funds. They are all in support, right? I'd like to mention something that came to my mind during this panel. I'm 45 years old. 45 years ago, the population globally was 4 billion. Today, we are 8 billion. This means that population doubled through the history of mankind only during the last 40 years. With population growth going this direction, I think this should be part of the financial sector strategies and looking forward to it. I'll move now to the clients. You have heard a lot from different parties, and I'm going to turn you now the floor to tell us your reflections on this. And I'd like to Saif Tulima. I read about your work in Rolls-Royce, 2 years, and then you quit and you decided to come and to pursue your entrepreneurship career in Egypt, to start Tulima. Can you first brief me about Tulima and how this company is working on fighting climate change, please?
So first of all, I think I'd like to thank the Federation of Egyptian Banks. I'd like to thank BDC, and I'd like to thank all of the panelists for coming in. I'd also like to thank all of the attendees of the actual panel, although I will say the sheer amount of you is slightly anxiety-inducing for me, who's only doing this for the first time. But thank you for coming. So for me, at some point, it was the question of where do I see my long-term career interests? And the way I looked at it and the way that I believe is, although please do excuse the metaphor, the area where I see a metaphor that kind of works for this is when you look at the world as having countries that represent the youth, if you will, and having other countries that represent the older generations. And the way that I looked at it at one point in time was that I'd rather be in a country that I viewed as a youthful country, a country that was still early on its developmental journey, where the opportunities are so much more available and the opportunities are so much more within reach. And that was a critical factor for me. Would I rather stay in a country where everything will, to a large extent, be easy as an employee? Or would I like to aim myself towards a more challenging career path, but quite likely a more rewarding career path? And this was the initial kind of thought process that brought me back to Egypt, what I view as the land of opportunity and the land where my skills are needed and where my skills can actually provide a benefit and provide a winning structure for either myself alone, if we're looking at it on a purely financial aspect, or for the country as a whole, if we're looking at it in a CSR, do good for those around you and do good for those who you can help. And for both of those, Egypt just worked to target that. Now, if I switch over and talk about Tulima and about what we do, Tulima is a relatively new startup. We're only 2 years old, and we're going into the agricultural field. We didn't try to reinvent the wheel. We didn't try to go and pick up a field from scratch and impose as much innovation on it as is the method or the modus operandi for a lot of countries around the world. Just ram it full of technology. We decided instead to go for a sector and an industry that is very, very old, very old in its structure, very old in its methods of operation, and we decided to revolutionize that. We decided to pick agriculture, and we decided to try and apply technologies and sciences that would make us both as efficient, as productive, and as sustainable as possible. And this is where Turima came in. We change farming by using up to 99% less water on some of our methods than traditional farming techniques. We save 70% of the energy utilized. We use 10% of the land space in order to produce 10 times the amount of yield. Turning a situation of, rather than targeting desert reclamation, which may not be the most sustainable method of ensuring food safety and food security, to instead just trying to become as efficient as possible and trying to use our land as efficiently and our resources as efficiently as possible. And that's where we come in.
Thank you so much. And let me tell you that I'm inspired by this. I'm inspired by this project in particular for two reasons. The first reason is that this project is not mitigation, not adaptation, but rather a co-benefit project. And being a co-benefit project is something that is very important in terms of finding the business case. So the business case is here. If we need to finance a business care, it's clear crystal in such sort of project. And this is in fact inspiring. Despite you are having no background in agriculture, you penetrated the field and you were able to do it. Thank you so much for the courage. Leaving Rolls-Royce and doing an agri-tech in Egypt is definitely took a lot of courage from you. Thank you so much for this. And please, and here we will, this will bring us to the product idea. This needs to be packaged as a product. Moving to Ahmed, I will give you the floor on the same question. What made you move to the entrepreneurship career? What is the relation of your company doing with climate change?
So first off, I would like to thank the panelists at the beginning, Tore and BDC, for inviting us for this panel, and everyone attending here. And answering the question is, like, my journey pursuing entrepreneurship started maybe not now with my current company Telda, but more around 5 years back, 2017, where I graduated as a software engineer, did my bachelor in technology, and in my university as a typical engineer, 99% of the class just travels abroad, either works in Google, on Amazon, Facebooks, and the big companies, right? And for me, this was quite a question mark. Like, why would everyone do that without even trying to do an impact here? Try and see if they succeed or basically fail in making an impact in the country. And for me, when everyone does something, it's kind of more of a driver for me to do the other way around. I wanted to kind of tap into making more impact than going into a 9-to-5 job or being similar to 100 or 1,000 people doing the same thing. And it started by pursuing building Swivel. Swivel is basically, it started facing the problem of having one of the heaviest traffic cities in Egypt, and coming from a background that has nothing to do with transportation, it was, for me, it was a personal problem. I commute every day, I take more than an hour. So it's very obvious that there's something you can do here. And this was the main driver for building Swivel back then. And now Swivel is one of the global leaders in mass transit, operating in all continents, and I've just listed on NASDAQ earlier this year. And honestly, it didn't stop there. I think looking at things you can solve in a market or a country as Egypt, it's endless, right? And this is the access to bigger opportunities and bigger impact. And one that is quite an obvious one, I'd say, is around financial inclusion, right? When you look at the macro level of the country, like the basic numbers don't add up, right? When you have a young population, around 61% is below the age of 30, high smartphone penetration, but very low banking penetration, right? So it was kind of an obvious opportunity to tap into. And I think something that we learned. It was a personal problem as well, honestly, having a hard time in everyday payments. Uh, it was kind of an obvious problem, and we learned that uh, actually one of the most underserved segments are the youth in financial institutions, and basically on any social class, like from high to the top to the lowest economic classes. And I think the problem that we anticipated are basically that there is a gap in communication maybe between how the youth are expecting services, financial what's on. The youth is basically between 16 to 35, right? So majority of them were born when iPhone exists, right? They didn't see but that. So technology was more of a given or an entitlement than an enhancement or an upgrade. And I think this is what we are tapping it in the moment, building Telda. And honestly, with the massive support that we've been having from the regulator, Central Bank of Egypt, in taking this idea from just an idea, a tech guy not having any banking background, actually don't understand their credit card statement, into getting in the banking industry, the support from the regulator, Bank Ducaire as well. Like, I personally have endless stories about how I was educated about the banking industry from the bank inside out. And alhamdulillah, we've managed to get our approval from the Central Bank of Egypt 2 months back. We're now in the market, and I think one big validation is now we have around 100,000 customers in less than 3 months, and 90% of them is between 16 to 35 years old. So I think this is something that we wanted to do, and I think tackling that segment or bridging the gap between the communication with the segment is what we're aspiring to do, and we believe will be doing the most impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Your Excellency, I know your time and your engagement, and thank you so much for having all this. I have one final question for you very quickly. I'd like from you one advice, youth, one advice, and one advice to multilateral development organization in order to make youth more inclusive.
Multilateral questions. It's not one question. Actually, my advice to the youth: dream and work beyond your dream ever. Don't stop. This is the bottom line that we work, and even work with the associations very closely to make the dream come true with the youth. I'm proud for the whole Egyptian youth because of in my positions I'm seeing something I couldn't see before with the Egyptian youth. For the banks and the sector, financial sectors, I'm not advised, but I have the advice from them ever. And thank you for them because of I've never for 4 years asked for something. I didn't have any refuse, but the cooperations of that. With the sports sectors, the youth sector, with the financial inclusions and awareness for the even the whole ages, because of our strategy for the national youth strategy and the sport youth strategy, we have both, and we start from the 5 years, the age till the 40. So we study very well the problem or the visions with the youth in Egypt and even the dream from the beginning. So the cooperations from the financial sectors is very high, highly appreciated, and we are looking for the future. Because of that, we have eventually something we call it the sport treasure financially with the Mr. Mohammed Litrebi. And this is the future thinking for the national sport strategy. And even we have with the central bank a lot of activity and plan for the futures and even the present, as well as with the Cairo Bank, as well as with our partner ever, the National Bank, Bank Al Ahli, even indirect or indirect. Indirect with the Ministry of Youth and Sports, indirect with the society and even the whatever the athletes or the sports, with the CIP, with the Saib Bank, with the many of them. So the cooperations come to the conclusions to accelerate the whole activity in Egypt for youth and sports. But for the futures, we have something else, the climate change awareness education curriculum, non-curriculums. Because of that, we have established something new. We call it the Climate Club. Climate Club will sit in and found it in the youth centers in Egypt, as well as we have the bank projects in the youth center to develop with the bank Al-Ahli and Bank Masr. So thank you. I appreciate. I have to go to the youth. So thank you very much. Shukran. Shukran.
So, thank you so much for the closing remarks by His Excellency. So there is now a strategy, and it's more than a strategy. I heard about part in implementation, such as the climate clubs. And I think this is a very good opportunity for the financial system to engage with. If there is climate clubs with concentrations, with people who have the awareness on the issue, we can integrate afterwards with. Moving to Mr. Sharif. I'd like to ask you from what has been said right now and going to you back. What is the roadmap of the Central Bank of Egypt when it comes to the file of youth inclusion, and in particular youth inclusion and climate change?
And the access to finance, because it's very important. Have you catch me in my first question? Your first question to me, you catch that the youth segment, it wasn't appealing. And you put it in a border, it wasn't appealing for the banks. You left the part that this is from 3 to 5 years ago. But what said in this panel from the government, from the banks, and from the youth themselves is proof how the improvement happened during the last years. When we are talking 45% inclusion in youth, so this is approximately more than 10 million out of 20 million eligible, okay? So this is a real achievement. Why? Because we are not mandating youth working with banks like other countries. In Europe, in some of the European countries, to go to the university, you have to open an account. We don't have this luxury. For all of this was the effort of banks. You found Bank du Caire, National Bank of Egypt, Bank Misr, going, making sponsorship with universities, with clubs, to attract this segment. It's a huge effort, okay? We are not yet reached the level of mandating, okay? So this is first. Secondly, when Telda said they have 100,000 customers in 3 months, and my knowledge, okay, from 10 days ago, they have a queue of another 100,000. Okay, this is proof. صح يا أحمد ولا إيه؟ Okay, ما شاء الله الله أكبر يعني. This is proof the change in mentality and the way of reaching customer or reaching this segment. When I said that we don't have a product, now we have a product, we have proposition, we have channels, we have different ways to reach this segment. One of them is the Asian banking, which is said that he got the approval from the central bank. But I want to highlight this because you catch me on this. Okay. Future plan is very optimistic. We have a lot of work and a lot of agreements with Ministry of Youth, not only regarding youth inclusion, but also for youth access to finance, which is very important and which is the future. If we are talking about climate change, and if we are talking about finance, as my colleagues in the panel said, that the finance is very important for climate change and also for youth, because this is a very important part. I will tell you very briefly what we did and what we will do. We already have our SMEs mandate the 25%, and when we are talking about MSMEs, and apart from the 25 mandate, it's a 10% for a small business. Small business is majority of small business is youth and startup and entrepreneurship. And this initiative with a subsidized interest rate was 5%, and everyone knows how much we are paying to subsidize the 5%. Secondly, we give a clear direction for the banking sector to go toward startup entrepreneurship, and we waive some of our, I don't want to say bureaucracy, but now small business up to 20 million, we waived all documents, all balance sheets almost. You don't require balance sheet. We allowed banks to use the behavior scoring. Now we are opening the economic accounts with no document, with an ID. And this is not only for access to finance, but also for digitalization. I want to talk about a very important initiative from the central bank, which is directed for entrepreneurship and startup, which is Nilepreneur. Nilepreneur, yes, is the initiative of the central bank, but it's the effort of all the banking sector. And we have 4 pillars in the Nilepreneur. The first one is the BDS Hub. BDS Hub, now we reach 52 hubs covering 20 governorate. All this hub is the bank's hubs. It's not the central bank, it's the central bank initiative, but it's the bank's hub. We are providing in this hub the non-financial services and financial advices. We are providing a different kind of service. Visibility studies, financial analysis, licensing, registration, supporting in access to finance, awareness. Okay. We have our incubation, and we have 5 types of incubation: engineering, software, fintech, packaging, and this is very important for the entrepreneurship. We have our innovation center. This innovation center is including the design house, factory, and the die design. The innovation and the incubation during the Nilepreneur is implemented 2019, and we started working in 2020. We served 1,000 company in these 2 initiatives only, the incubation and the design house. For the BDS Hub, we provided 184,000 service for 85,000 customers. Out of them, 75% were youth. Okay, and this is, I think, very important numbers. And the 5th pillar was education and awareness for companies and entrepreneurship, how to do business, create with them the idea, making networking, provide them with the supply and demand to allow the entrepreneurship not only to build the company, but also for sustainability and to ensure the success and the continuity. I think the future is very optimistic from our side. I'm very happy with the cooperation with the different government bodies. I'm very happy with the support from the banking sector. If we were talking about previously, this segment wasn't appealing. What I'm seeing now on terms of youth as individual and on terms of entrepreneurship and startup and the support for this segment, it's out of our imagination. I'm very optimistic for the next period. And I want to use this opportunity to thank all the banking sector for this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharif. But in fact, Bardo, while you were speaking about this, something came to my mind. I think the Egyptian central bank experience is very peculiar rather than other central banks in the world. It's very custom, exactly. It's
enabler. We are always telling when we are sitting with bank and meeting banks, take us as enabler. Yes, we are issue regulation, yes, but at the same time, we are enabler. How to support banks to reach the segment and to make the business. And I think we can take the opinion of Mr. Tariq on this one.
I will do directly right now. So we have now the statement of His Excellency as a strategic direction. And in fact, he went into implementation, which is something very peculiar about the Egyptian experience. And then we have the regulator giving all the support in this respect. I'd like to hear from your esteemed self, what is Bank Ducare future plans in these terms?
Thank you, Dr. Ihab. Basically, Bank Ducare has a very strong track record in terms of sustainability. We are very close to our community by virtue of our very solid outreach and sizable clientele base. We have been working continuously during the past years to upgrade our sustainability standards for better community with specific focus on youth. You mentioned an important aspect, which is training and capacity building. We have been establishing many partnerships, either through MDFIs, our partners in many aspects, our experts, in order to increase capacity building and increase the awareness of sustainable development that would have a better results on our overall objectives at large. On the lending side, Bank Ducare is working continuously in order to promote sustainable financing across all its business units. We have undergone major upgrades in our internal processes and system to meet such objectives, whether when we're talking about businesses like the corporate banking, the SMEs, and the microfinance. And the latter, basically, we have a very strong and legacy experience in this area, where youth captures more than 30% of this portfolio, and we are trying to gear a substantial number of these projects into low environmental impact projects like the handicrafts and others. If we're going to talk, I think we have stressed on change and innovation. I think this is a very important point, and as I mentioned earlier, our role is not only falls under financial intermediation and lending and this stuff only, but our roles go beyond this. So I think we have to have, as banks, a mindset change. As Sharif mentioned right now, enablement is very important, and we have to shift from the conventional brick and mortar approach toward more agile approaches in terms of serving better our clients. And this is a very important aspect. And having said that, when we're talking about agility, we have to talk about change and innovation. This is a very important part, and this will not be achieved either through very solid partnerships with all stakeholders. And here I want to stress on our customers, and I am glad that we have two of our panelists here, which is representing a very successful model of such partnerships. So I think this is a very important aspect that we have to tackle, and we have to always stress and work on improving it. Maybe on the community side, we have our role as well in terms of increasing and meeting the sustainability objectives. We have established many partnerships among many stakeholders in terms of sustainability, in terms of green economy and others. I commend here the efforts of our sustainability teams in having partnerships like Be Green, Greenish, and Banlastic. And I would like to highlight here an important point, that the majority of these partnerships are youth-driven. And with youth entities, this is done alongside with a multitude of partnerships with ministries, with NGOs, with embassies, MDFIs, and others. So I believe that we have to continue working on this mandate as well. And in a nutshell, I would like to say that all our efforts is demonstrated in our sustainability reports, like the GRI, the UN Global Compact, and UNEP NFI, and others. So basically, in a nutshell, we want here to stress on 2 points. One, capacity building and training. This is very important to upgrade and expand the ecosystem. And the other thing is innovation. And I believe that these 2 points are very important, because here, this is a youth panel. So we have to stress on these 2 points. Thank you.
Mr. Tariq, you mentioned something about the mismatch between supply and demand. And we are sitting beside the supply and the demand. I'd like you to give us two advices. One for the supply side, what do you want from them? And one for the demand side.
I think the mandate of the supply side is very clear. We have here today two, I would say, long track record MDFIs, either AFD or BII. Definitely their mandate is very clear. And I would say that Egypt is a land of opportunities. And I think there are very large room for financing that could be catered to our banks. We have a very strong understanding to our markets, to our clients, and we are, I would say, would be very much committed to avail such funding to the community and to our clients, with focus on youth and other type of clients that would meet the sustainability objectives. As far as the youth or our clients are concerned, I believe that we have to have the ambition in order to be always innovative. And I think that typically in Egypt, we have very good, strong examples for youth that could be more creative for the welfare of their countries.
Thank you so much. In 1 minute, what do you want from the banking sector and what do you want from the regulator?
I think from the regulator is basically enablement. Usually starts at the regulator, right? And I think the initiative that has been happening for the past while have been amazing. I believe consistently improving on that is what's going to take us forward in here. From financial institutions, I think aside from financing to sustainability, there is an angle that I feel is more around the banking industry in general. The banks have built brands that becoming bigger and bigger and more aspirational to the youth. And I think leveraging this channel into more of amplifying the impact than doing a single impact, and in a mostly youthful population, I believe this would be the most impactful on awareness and education. Yeah.
I think we heard it clearly. We need more enablement and consistency.
So one piece of advice for the regulator, for the banks. I like that we think in the same way, and that's why we work together. I also structured in terms of supply and demand. In terms of supply, I think we have, like the AFD, Banque du Caire, and BE, Banque Miss partnership, we now have incentives in place. We have concessional financing windows. We have investment grants to support projects. We have technical cooperation packages to support the banks in their own, climate tools, gender strategies, and to support the entrepreneurs as well. So the advice to youth entrepreneurs is use them. Use these instruments, demand those products from your banks. And for the regulators, or maybe more generally from public authorities, speaking on the demand side, we've touched about this again. We've touched this already, but I want to stress that again. We really need technical education and training. We've talked about financial literacy, but we also need to support climate and environment-driven curricula in schools and universities. We need to encourage young students to pursue environmental and climate-related fields, and then to be able to have the tools to seize the opportunities that they see in the market, just like you did. And finally, we need to empower them more from a governance and civic engagement side, to empower them to launch their projects, their initiatives, and be at the table of climate negotiations tomorrow.
I will take this as a press release, by the way, okay?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess from my perspective, just to reiterate what my colleague from AFD said, I mean, I think bringing together in regulation, in policy, the youth and the climate angle together, I think is absolutely core, because often I think in regulation or policy making, you have sort of different parts of the organization working on, different initiatives, youth, gender and diversity, climate. But I think we need to all see this as part of an agenda, because, we have a climate emergency that requires significant economic, transformation across all sectors, and therefore thinking about, what leadership women can provide, what leadership youth can provide, minorities can provide. How do we integrate them all in the, financial system to access capital to really bring forward these solutions? I think is vital.
I will bring you good news. 90% of the sustainability departments in the Egyptian banks are led by women. At least, right? Yes. We need a man equality, exactly. Your call.
If I try to look at the situation as general advice, although I'm not sure I'm really on the knowledgeable enough to give advice to these authorities, but what I would like to say is, and this especially goes to the banks and to the regulatory bodies, I guess, and the push is, rather than be in an aspect where, as the minister was just saying, as the honorable minister was just saying, the advice to us is to dream. The advice to a lot of the people who enable our dreams and who are the key stakeholders who would allow us to achieve the dreams that we have would be to dream with us, rather than it be a situation where we're the ones trying to push against the wall and trying to create and innovate and to do all of this. I imagine a bit more acceptance of the creativity and a bit more acceptance of the methodologies of the youth of today is essentially something that will help us move forward hand in hand. We are the age group that will, for lack of a better word, we are the age group that will suffer the most as a result of climate change. We're also the age group that is most challenged when it comes to financial ability and financial power, where we've not had the time to create the financial prowess that a lot of people do. So we know that there's a problem coming up. We know that there's an environmental crisis coming up. We are trying to resolve it, but we need your help with us, and we need your hands with us in order to be able to resolve it. Thank you.
If you allow me, I have a last word. Building on what is safe said. Maybe if you allow me also, there is a requirement from a regulator. Building on what you said. Finance is very important. The role of the international developers is very important. Not only for facilities. Yes, facilities is there, but what is the price of the facilities? Is it only cheap fund, or the international bodies need to bear cost like exactly the local government is bearing to support the youth segment and to support the climate change? There is a cost. Okay, the cost is only in our shoulder. Yes, they are bringing for us facilities with a cheap fund. It's not only cheap fund. We need some subsidized facilities to support this segment, because they will not be allowed to grow with the current pricing. This first. Secondly, access to finance is not only facilities, investment. And this is very important in the near future. If we want to boost the youth business and the climate change project, we need investors, we need partnering. And this is the role of the international developer agencies. Bring for us, for the emerging market, for the developing countries, investors to work with our client, with our people, with our customer, with our companies in the climate change or the climate transformation and the youth growth. This is very important. Finance is important, and investment is very important in the next period if we want to boost and to support this segment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharif. Beside your words, beside the words, I feel the passion, and this is something else. Thank you so much for this. Exactly, this is youth more than us. Thank you so much for this. I'd like to thank all of the panelists. Please thank them with me. Definitely, all of the recommendations taken will be shared by you, and appreciate if you downloaded the issue paper, the sustainability report, and the UNEP FI report through the barcode that is here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Afan. أنا معلش عطلتك بس كان ينفع فاشن في الليل.